Good afternoon. We usually like to start on time. Since I got most of my staff here, I'd like to make sure that happens. What I'd first like you all to do as candidates, just to introduce yourself so the team knows who you are as you ask questions and do stuff, and it just gives us an idea who we're dealing with this time. Jared, start with you.
My name is Jeremy Schaefer.
My name is Aaron Hill.
Denise Kolpak, candidate for mayor.
Derek Arneson.
Anna Johnson.
Nikki Gullickson.
I'm just Chad.
Chad Peterson for Fargo City Commission. Michelle Turnberg, current Fargo City Commissioner, candidate for mayor.
Excellent. Well, I know you guys have been out and about now campaigning for your different roles of what you want to do for city government, but what we felt we'd like to do for you, rather than have each one you go through one of my departments, is maybe we'll give you some ideas of what we do, and then if you had questions, you could come back and ask us. Oftentimes, as a new commissioner, as my new commissioners come in, they go through all the departments and kind of figure out what's going on. And I just thought that we'd try, Mike and I thought, maybe what we'll do is kind of give you an overview of what the city is. And city is different than legislature because when we do our budget, it's a little bit different. 70% of our budget is personnel. So a lot of times when somebody says you should cut, like in the legislative area, you listen to the governor right now, you'll say cut 10%, cut 5%, cut 3%. Well, in city government, what happens is our personnel is so tight that if we did that, it usually means we're cutting people if you really wanted to cut it to any great value. The other handicap we have now with the 3% cap that the legislative body has on us, you have to be extremely careful. Last year's budget, we came in at 2.8%, which is underneath the 3% budget. I'm happy to report that from the 2025 assessment that we did, or we just had our audit, we have $9 million worth of surplus, so we're doing well in our reserve fund. We wanted to bring our reserve fund back up to 25%, and that indeed it is. 6 million of that 9 million is a land sale. So we sold some land by the landfill, and that really was a big bump. But we don't have a lot of land necessarily to sell, so we can't always figure that. So the challenge any commissioner or mayor will have going forward is really sustainability. How do you bring your revenues in line with your expenses, and are you able to do things? And sometimes if you think about it with the personnel, if we try to keep COLAs or keep everything straight, that's 2 to 3 million a year. So every year you will grow, your budget will grow even if you stand still, if you have steps and you have personnel issues. So the real challenge for anybody going forward is to match your expenses with your revenue. And I think the city, Mike does an excellent job with the team and Susan Thompson when we get around to doing this. But if we're going to expand in the south, then Dow has to add 2 workers and snowplows to do that south. If you don't add that, you don't grow. So the challenge the city of Fargo has, with a 20% grow in 10 years, what are you going to do? We are not like any other city. We do not stand still. So the challenge for all of you as you go forward is how do we make the right mix so it's taxpayers are happy, residents are happy. And one of the things I think our community we've always done is we've given great service. We have fantastic department heads, and every one of them is brilliant in what they do and very thoughtful. So oftentimes they'll find a grant, they'll find some other way to find money, they'll find a way to duplicate different people doing double jobs. I see a lot of stuff where we do innovative ideas, and they continue to do that. When Tom does the CIP, it looks at closely what the neighborhoods need, and every one of us gets a benefit from that. So I'm going to let the team tell you what's going on. We'll be available for questions afterwards. And Michael is trying to keep it crisp and distinct so you can kind of get through here rapidly. But we want to give you the information, and feel free to ask questions. You want to hold questions till the end, Mike? As they come up. Okay. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mayor, very much for that introduction. And I just want to welcome everybody to City Hall. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I just have a couple of announcements, and I want to just give you an overview of the schedule and what's in your packet before you. First of all, just for the exit, the doors are right behind you, and the restrooms are right across the hall if anyone should need that towards the end of the session. And so what we're going to do today is just provide a very brief overview of some highlights and some topics that we'll cover today and likely at our future orientation session as well. Our orientation session after the election for those who win the election is really in depth. We go into a 3 to 4 hour session where we cover all sorts of topics We do all sorts of training. We go deeper on the budget. But today, we just want to give you a good sense of some kind of high-level topics and pictures of it on public safety, on the budget, and a couple of other matters. So this session, I should also note, is being recorded. For those who aren't able to join us today, they will be able to watch this at a later date. But I thought it'd be really important first just to show and demonstrate to you that we have a great leadership team, and that many of whom have joined us today. What I thought we could do is I'll just have them wave their arms or hands when I kind of call on them in the back. And I'm going to see if I can see that far. Scott Olson is in the back, Jim Hassauer, both from our utilities, Troy Hall, our water utility director, Tim Dirks is in the back, and then going right into the front here, let's see, we have Nicole, our planning and zoning director. We've got Jen Fowle, our public health director, Tom Knockmoose, city engineer, Susan Thompson, our finance director, Shonda Radnick, I'm sorry, I looked past you there, Sean, with inspections. And there's Becky Majerus, our facilities director, and who else? And there's Scott Anderson, our brand-new Chief Communications Officer, Ben Dow, Public Works, Gary Lorenz, the Fire Chief, our Interim Police Chief, Travis Stefanowitz, Ian McLean, the City Attorney, Brenda Derrig, the Assistant City Administrator, Jill Manette, our Human Resources Director, Ron Gronenberg, our IS Director, and did I get everybody? Who did I miss? Is that all of it? Okay, so we've got a good number of people here today. I really appreciate their help in pulling this information together. And what I thought I would do is just explain to you what's in this packet before you. For those departments who are not presenting today, we included one-page summaries of all of those areas. So everything from the commission office to wastewater, water reclamation, human resources, all the departments. So the people that you don't see up here at the podium today, they've all included some information for you today. Read that at your leisure. If you have any questions, by all means, please contact us. Please reach out. My contact information, Brenda's contact information is on the back side of this agenda that's in your packet. So please feel free to call or email us anytime. We're happy to help. And I would just note that we have some really good presentations today, and I think some really good information that you'll appreciate hearing. And so again, when we get through the election, we'll reach out to those candidates who do win, and we'll certainly reach out on your schedule so that we get something on the calendar probably in those last few days of June before the July 1 transition to schedule that orientation session and make sure that we're really giving you everything that you need to prepare for day one success, because we really feel that this is a very, very important thing, and the best thing we can do is invest that time as a leadership team into your success on that first day so that when you join us, we're ready to go and you've got your questions answered and we're in a really, really good position. I should also note too, all of this information prepared today is really done really with the kind of idea that all the same information is prepared for all of the candidates. So when you hear about the land development code, when you hear about public safety, this is the same information that even for the candidates not joining us today, we'll make sure that they get a copy of that information. So most importantly, we just want to make sure we're answering questions at the end too. We'll try to save some time for you to come up and have open dialogue and conversation with our cabinet team. And really appreciate the time that they're investing in this, because this will allow them too to connect with you, and maybe you got a quick question that comes to mind. You don't want to interrupt them while they're giving their remarks and presentations, but they're happy to answer that question at the end. We are more than happy to help you out and make sure that you leave here today prepared and that you've got everything that you need going forward. So with that, I will turn it over first to Nicole. We'll have some slides. And I should note on the left side of your folder, all of the slides and all the information that we have up here on the screens today was also in the packet. So you've got full prints of that. You can take it with you. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to answer, or feel free to jump in and ask us as we go along. So Nicole Crutchfield, our Planning and Zoning Director. Thank you.
Good afternoon. And it's a little bit more formal than what I signed up for, but we'll go with it. And so, and we're glad to answer any questions offline as well. So we thought, what could be harder but to try to do a new land development code, a once in a generational set of time while we're doing an election. And so we thought this would be a good time to brief you on where we're at. Many of you have been part of the process. And it all starts with our growth plan that we adopted in 2024. So the growth plan that we adopted in 24, so in your packet is just what what we call a one-page. The front side is kind of a snapshot of what's in the growth plan, and the back page is where we're at with the land development code process. So the growth plan, for those that don't know, I typically call it a growth management plan. And it's really about how do we plan to grow over time. And it's an unusual tool that most cities don't have. And typically you just have your comprehensive plan and then your zoning ordinance. We have this interim plan called the growth plan. And it can be thought of as a strategic plan for a lot of our city departments who are part of the drafting of the growth plan. And this was done with thousands of public members, as well as focus groups, et cetera. And really the nutshell that we're trying to tell, the story we're trying to tell is, since the start of time, Fargo has had a nice, steady 2% growth. Economy, has been nice and steady. Growth has been nice and steady. And at the staff level, I jokingly say, we don't want to be the staff to break that 2% nice growth. And, but it means challenging us to manage our resources. And so when we look to the public process of what is that vision for our community members, building off of Go 2030, which is due for an update. And so those that are elected will be part of the discussion as we talk about Go 2030 updates, our comprehensive plan, and that was adopted in 2011. And so as we look to that vision, how do we paint the future for ourselves and where is the best place to grow? And so through the public process, through public voting, kind of public community meetings, we decided that what best sustains the city is focusing more than we historically have done on infill. And so this, you can see 66% of our growth is targeted for greenfield areas, whereas 33% of our future growth is about that infill. And for those that have been in the community a long time, are familiar with core neighborhood challenges, institutional anchors, and those challenges as they establish their footprints in those neighborhoods. And then as we look to the greenfield areas where we have large landholders who have maybe taken time to develop their strategic plans or their master plans, and so there's like geographic areas that we skip to that might be considered leapfrogging, and depending on who uses those words. But and so really it's about strategically how do we manage that growth. So the growth plan is a really thick document. Glad to answer more questions about it, but my favorite parts of the growth plan is actually the last page. So the last page is a chart that gives us a 10-year working plan, a 10 to 20-year working plan of all the different departments and our role in that as we build our future together. And so step one for the planning department and for the city as a whole is this new land development code. So the new land development code is our zoning ordinance, otherwise known as our zoning ordinance. And really the challenge we're at right now is how that zoning ordinance, how married is that going to be to our vision? And we just 2 weeks ago published the first draft of this plan. And this plan of the zoning ordinance, we had an open house for that. And as part of that open house, we introduced where we're at. So right now it's a first blush of this plan. It's considered a rough draft. And now we're in that collaborative stage of what is the right sizing of this draft plan for, just realized I had a graphic there. What is the right size of this land development code? What are those metrics? How rigid are these ordinances going to be, and how predictable are they for setting our pace moving forward? And so, for instance, we just had a meeting with the home builders last Friday as we talk about how do these new drafts sit with you and your practices and market needs. We'll be having similar focus groups with neighborhood interest groups and other interest groups. And so our job as staff is to try to bring forward to the elected officials a regulation plan that's built on consensus. And so our goal would be to bring those elements for consensus in front of the elected body as we get forward. This next draft, so right now we're in the collaborative co-working space of building the regulating plans together. So right now we have an open comment period up through May 1st. And these are just really, what is your essence? What are some of the tools that might be affecting you? And doesn't mean that's the last opportunity for comments. May 1st is just, what's your first blush at this? Our planning commission, we're lucky to have a planning commission that wants to roll up their sleeves and be reviewing this line by line. Honestly, that surprised us a little bit. We didn't know they would want to be in the wordsmithing element of the regulations, but they do, and at least most of them do. And so we're at that line by line stage of refining. We'll have a new draft coming out in May, hopefully mid-May, where we'll be right-sizing these ordinances for Fargo. So given to mean our economy, our climate, all the things that are unique to Fargo, these drafts have been developed for using our consultants who do this best practice around the country. They did attempt to get it right for Fargo, but we, as experts in our community, know we need a little bit more fine tuning. And so that's where we're at today with the Land Development Code. And then you've heard a lot of talk about incentives and how incentives work with land development. And that is a bit of a moving target. I don't think that'd be a surprise for anybody here in the room. And so what the growth plan starts to talk about for incentives is how to use that to define, quote, optimal growth. And so there's the day-to-day practice of coming, wanting to get a building permit, develop the land per the regulations. Most of those don't need incentives, but some of those special projects might want or need incentives. And so right now, we're at the stage of just trying to obtain the data at a parcel-based level, so a spatial database. Right now, we have a electronic, Excel spreadsheet database, but that doesn't necessarily tie to the parcels and how those parcels have changed over time. So we're doing a look back over the last 20 years and to show how those incentives have been worked on or used to get the value that we have, the land value that we have today. And then the purpose for all this is to create this database, to create a tool for future decision-making with the future elected officials. And so, right now, we're just at the data stage. There'll be much more to come after the election about how to further define these incentives and when and where might make sense and when and where might not make sense. And so there's a lot of future discussion on this. So right now, we're just on the cusp of defining the problem at a finer detail related to data. And so the bottom of the page is just your timeline, where we're at, here for any questions, and we can do Q&A now, or no, you have much more on your agenda as we talk.
Thank you. And next, we'll do a public safety update. We'll start with the fire chief and then the interim police chief after that.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gary Lorenz, Fire Chief here for the City of Fargo, and thank you for this opportunity to present in front of you today. So, in front of you with the document starts out with the mission statement for the Fargo Fire Department. It's an all-encompassing statement, but it's short and to the point. Just to read it for you, the Fargo Fire Department's mission is to reduce the rate of emergencies through public education and code enforcement, protect lives and property, and respond to emergencies in a professional and courteous manner. And so, going down the page, to get to the money part first, our 2026 budget was $23,508,000. And to dovetail on what Mayor Mahoney was talking about, nearly 94% of that budget is salary and benefits. So as far as operation, financial-wise, our budget, in my opinion, is very lean. Bulk of that makes up our people, which is the core of our department. It really is. We don't function as a fire department without our employees. It just doesn't happen. So our organization, I've got it broken down into 5 primary focuses of the whole organization. The most recognizable component of the fire department are the fire stations, the fire trucks, the crews out on the street, and the things that we see. That's our operation division. We have 149 full-time employees authorized through the budget, and the bulk of them, 84%, are in our operations division. That's done with 8 fire stations strategically located throughout the city. We base our locations on a lot of factors, but to boil it down into a couple, we look at risk, the type of risk that's in a specific area of the city. We watch for the growth, and then we look for demand for service. As we see areas of the city where we have a continual rise in the type of risk in that area, along with an increase in demand for service, there's no designated trigger point, but once we have some markers where we go, this is the time we need to start at least planning for protections in certain areas of the city. And that may mean reevaluating the entire city, and sometimes relocating a station makes more sense than adding a station. And so that's part of our evaluation process. And then the services provided are kind of listed in the sheet here. You know, the obvious ones, fire suppression, emergency medical, and then the specialties, the hazardous material, technical rescue, water rescue. One of the things I like to say is when somebody calls 911 and the dispatchers aren't sure who to send, they'll send us to kind of, at least to evaluate the situation and call additional resources if we need it. The other piece that's not listed here in regards to hazardous material and structural collapse is we provide regional response to the southeast portion of North Dakota. In the state of North Dakota, there's 4 regional response teams designated on the Department of Emergency Services, and Fargo is one of those 4 teams. The other 3 being Bismarck, Minot, and Grand Forks. So we spend an incredible amount of time training to maintain the skills and proficiencies for those teams. The equipment for those teams is funded through Homeland Security money, funneled down through the Department of Emergency Services to the fire department. It's not local dollars, but it's our people that provide the service for those teams. Without the personnel, those teams don't exist. The other thing, we try, even though the next division I'm going to talk about is community risk reduction, we try to incorporate all divisions of the organization within the community risk reduction model. And so our fire prevention crews will inspect a lot of the non-permitted, almost all of them, commercial structures every year in the city. The other thing they do while they're on these inspections is we do what's called a pre-plan. When we respond to an emergency, it's nice to know how the building's constructed, where specialty, the fire department connections, the alarm systems, any unique hazards to that building are all identified as part of our inspection process that the crews perform. And then that information goes out on our mobile data computer at the time we have a response to that area. It's a very important function that we provide. And then we work with the water department, and we maintain all of the city, we don't maintain them, but we test them, flush them, ensure they're operable, every fire hydrant in the city of Fargo. So that's quite a task that our crews provide in addition to their emergency responses. The second division I have broken down is a community risk reduction. This is, I like to refer to it as the least recognizable part of our department, but one of the most important. Our first line of defense in regard to fires is always our plan review and construction processes. If we can prevent emergencies from happening on the front end, we're always the most successful. And so these are the people that are out in the street. It's our fire marshal, our deputy fire marshal, that make up fire marshals that are part of that division, that are reviewing all the plans that come through for sprinkler plans, alarm systems. They're monitoring the buildings during the construction. They're doing the tests of the systems as they're being built to ensure that they're built correctly and then operational. And then once a building is constructed, we work with the building department very closely during the construction of a building, but once it's operational, the fire department is the only department that's in most of those commercial structures on an annual basis. So ensuring that they're built from the ground up is a very important function within the city that our fire marshal's office takes care of. Our support services department, their biggest function is our training division. They're the train our recruit classes coming in and also maintain our training of our people that are within the organization. Every person is required to do at least 20 hours of training per month in a multitude of the disciplines that we do, to a total of 240 a year. And our training division helps coordinate and facilitate all of that training, as well as doing the new recruit academies. So it's a never-ending job. You know, a lot of the tasks that we provide, I like to call them low-frequency, high-consequence events. So the things that we do every day is what we become the most proficient at. But we mean to maintain those skills for those events that don't happen as frequently, and the way we do that is with training. So training is a huge component of what we do within the fire department. The Emergency Management Division within the city falls underneath the fire department. We have one emergency manager. His office is located out of our Public Safety Center, and he not only works for the fire department, but he coordinates with all of the departments within the city to keep maintained our city's emergency operation plan and some of those functions when we have those large-scale, bigger incidents. Coordinates with the police department, all of the agencies, the engineering that could be a part of those emergencies. He also works closely with the Department of Emergency Services with the state of North Dakota. They provide emergency manager funding for within the counties and part of the position within the city as well, that funding. And then lastly is our administrative division. That's made up of myself, our 3 division chiefs. We have a data analyst, this is a new position this year, and then our 2 office staff that try and keep my stuff all organized, but it's a difficult task for them. And so just a few statistics going down our page here. As far as service to the community for the emergency responses, that's the part that, again, is the most recognizable. In 2025, we had 14,502 calls that we responded to citywide. And of those, approximately 60+% are made up of EMS calls. A lot of times we get questions of, why are we going on EMS calls? The main reason is we're strategically located around the city. So when those emergencies happen, whether it's a cardiac arrest, a trauma situation, we're likely closer to that scene than the ambulance is. And so by being dispatched with the ambulance, approximately 53% of the time we're there before the ambulance gets there. And that could, that doesn't give us a time. It could be anywhere from seconds to minutes that we're on scene before they are. The ambulance service runs a little differently. They will post up around the city based on their call volume and areas, but they don't have the static locations that we do as the fire service. And then last year we had 224 fires. Those are vehicle fires, structure fires, all the different types of fires that are coded into our National Fire Reporting System. 2 things we're very proud of in the city as our fire department. One is our insurance service office rating of a Class 1. As it states there, there's only 127 departments out of 32,000 approximate nationally that hold this Class 1 rating, and then especially those that are accredited at the same time. Accreditation comes through the Center for Public Safety Excellence, Commission on Fire Accreditation International. That's a process that's every 5 years. We're reaccredited, and we have to address over 250 performance indicators and have numerous verification and validation processes that says we're doing what we say we do. So we upload all of this information to the site. We're assigned a peer team made up of 4 people, and then every 5 years, that team comes into Fargo and looks at all of our facilities, reviews all of our information to make sure that what we're documenting and providing is in fact accurate. So 2, I like to say, very prestigious awards that we have here with Fargo Fire Department. We're fortunate to have a city commission and elected officials that also support those things as well. Our current priorities right now in the city is our training facility. It was built in 1966 and it's exceeded its life expectancy. It's on a 1-acre lot. It's also part of our Fire Station 4, and we're currently in the process of developing plans for rebuilding that facility. On the second page shows our organizational structure for you to review, and with that, I stand for any questions.
Quick question, Chief. Where is the Public Safety Center?
That is out in the industrial park, located on 15th Avenue and 44th Street North. Cardinal Glass, Smurfit Stone Container, up in that area. It's where it's at. It's our Fire Station 6 is also located at that location. Thank you.
Okay.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Travis Stefanowitz, the interim chief of the Fargo Police Department. So we'll just kind of start with our basic organizational structure. With that, we have 3 divisions. Those 3 divisions are broke up kind of by skill set. So our neighborhood services division, they're our patrol response. So those are the folks that you see out there mostly in the squad cars and out in the neighborhoods. Criminal investigations division, those are specialized investigators, detectives, narcotics group, things of that nature, and our professional standards division. Professional standards is our training division, as well as our professional accountability unit, which most commonly referred to as an internal affairs type unit. With that, the 201 sworn kind of broke up. It's a little bit lopsided in the fact that our neighborhood services division, that captain who oversees about 152 employees. So at some point here in the near future, we will have to work on a structure to break that a little bit so we can reduce some of that workload for them and also then increase our efficiency and break our structure a little bit. But with 232 employees, it ends up being a very complex machine that's running on a daily basis with each leg of that table really dependent on the other one. No one job gets done without the others helping out, including all the folks back over there. We are very dependent on the rest of the citywide work group here to get our job done. Some stats. It's easy to put numbers to a lot of things, but there's always a lot of other information and complex issues behind those stats. So last year, 98,000 calls for service. So to put that into a little bit of perspective, you know, the idea of our employee group taking calls for service, if we just spread that out across, that's 270 calls for service per day. Then break that down to 89 calls per shift. So depending on what our officer number is, that can be anywhere between 8 and 10 or 12 calls per shift per officer. So as we break that down, if your call for service, if it was an assault that requires evidence collection or things of that nature, that call for service could last a couple of hours, which now means that workload is also being shuffled around and or passed around to somebody else, and then also trying to manage all of those as it's spread across the city. So if you think of our 50 square miles, now you've got officers traversing all over the city trying to get back and forth to our central location where we would book evidence and things of that nature, which does make it kind of difficult. So we hope to grow with the fire department in the near future and find ways to have a facility in other areas of the city so that we don't have our officers traversing all the time to drop off evidence and things of that nature. But also very, very difficult for our overall strategic plan when, similar to the fire department, 92% of our budget is personnel related. Some more statistics here. So again, part of a regular conversation is crime rate. So crime reduction in the last year, 10% down. However, when you consider the people that are involved in those things, depending on which neighborhood you're in or which area of town, you might feel like that looks or feels different. And we have to work through that through public perception. I think we can do a better job at sharing information with people, walking them through all these things so that they have a much better understanding overall as to what we're doing and how we're managing these things. But that is a goal for us, is to make sure that we're sharing information a lot more clearly and helping everybody understand what that information means. Because as it comes to some of the crime statistics, it changes. And it shouldn't sound like it changes, but it does, because after a crime gets cleared, depending on how it was cleared, there could be cleared by arrest, or that crime, if there is a homicide, but is it 1 or 2, depending on if the person was pregnant? Is that a 2 or is that a 1? Those numbers can change across the board as it gets reported to the state and then to the feds. So as we work through that, it becomes very complex because, again, as things get cleared by arrest or work through the system, some of those numbers change, not certainly drastically, but they can change. And then the question always comes up, why? Why does that change? So all of our statistics are reported through the state and then out to the federal government. So there's a lot of checks and balances, but again, that's sometimes a moving number. Proactive policing efforts. So we have our real-time crime center. So that was really, this last year was its first true year in operation. We were inching towards that goal. So we have people monitoring different things in the city, the data analysts as they're working through daily information, 72-hour crime trends, monthly, yearly. All this information that's put together really comes from our intel analysts who do a really, really good job at gathering this information. Because we aren't always able to staff the real-time crime center, a lot of times we are using injured people to sit in there, which also then helps us out because as crimes are then committed in their presence, as a sworn presence, we are able to do something about that, which really helps us out in the downtown area. Our traffic safety team, as you saw on that first slide, it was over 15,000 traffic stops that were conducted in this last year. That's a really impressive number. That really helps for people, visibility, seeing the folks out there. And a driving concern in our community that we've heard over and over is dangerous driving behaviors. So being able to actually have a group of people dedicated to that is extremely important to us. And in my belief, we had a really good impact with that. If you back up some time ago in 2016, we had to disband our traffic safety unit at that time just because we needed people out there taking calls for service. So we're kind of back at that balancing act of getting people out there to take the calls for service, the follow-up that's engaged with all that, plus addressing the dangerous driving behaviors throughout the community. So delicate balancing act with a very complex machine. Our community engagement team, a lot of people see them in the downtown area for the most part. They're very, very in tune to what's happening downtown. Names, faces, people, they're really good at that, but then they're also the group of people that are helping us with a lot of our other engagement efforts, whether that's at schools or other neighborhood groups. They're able to make that connection for us and help set those events up for us. My opinion on some of that is if we can find a way to add some support staff to help organize those things so that we can keep the officers out doing what sworn officers need to be doing, and then show up for those types of events and or work on those activities, whether it's an enforcement activity or whatever it is, just trying to be a little bit more efficient with our resources, as they are extremely important, but it is important to us that we keep them in the downtown area and in specific neighborhoods that have a specific issue that we're trying to address. So a current challenge for us is definitely staffing and growth. Very difficult for all of us, I think, in the entire city as we're working through this, but we definitely need to grow with the city and use our resources much more efficiently. Mental health and social issues. So when we are discussing those calls for service, those mental health calls for service can last for hours at times, and probably not the right tool dealing with that problem. We need help with whether it's long-term facilities or short-term facilities, just facilities that we can take them to the experts. We are definitely a tool to make sure that everybody's safe in dealing with those issues, but sometimes we can end up dealing with that issue for hours. And then people get frustrated when then someone else says, they're not welcome at this facility or whatever the case might be, and then they see them back out in the community, hours later. Public perception of crime, that's a really important one to me personally. I think we can do a better job at sharing information and walking everybody through the process of what the legal process looks like. Because sometimes the police department is the face of a lot of the information that's relayed. So there might be a dismissal of a case and that was decided by a judge and or the state's attorney's office for whatever reason, but that was the police department's involvement and it might be even their fault. And it might not be an at fault, it might be just something else that was a part of the legal process that didn't happen or did happen, and that was the outcome. But again, we end up being that face of a lot of that. Facilities and infrastructure is another hot topic for us as the city continues to grow south. Just the idea of having something in the southern edge of the city, whether that's a small corner of one of the fire stations or in one of the libraries or a standalone facility, we definitely need to find a way to get ourselves into the southern edge of the city so that way our officers aren't spending so much time traversing the city back and forth. Similar to the fire department, I think you said your building was built in the 60s. Our training center, even though it's just a small building, was built in the 70s and is also aging out very, very similarly. So we definitely need to do something about that because training is definitely a priority, but when you're also balancing 100,000 calls for service on a day-to-day basis, finding the time to do that is very difficult. So just to give you a kind of an understanding of that, so our day shift, let's say there's 30 officers there. So as a department, we had 24 officers that were either injured, gone on FMLA, or used vacation time, long-term vacation time, some other reason. 24 officers in February were not a part of our department because they were gone for long-term injury, FMLA, military leave, all those things. Last month, that number was 18. So if our right size for our department is, let's just say for easy math, is 100, we would really need 120 or 140 to account for all of those other things that are happening. And that's not including time that needs to be spent training. Because just like in the fire department, we've got these low-frequency events. However, that for us, they're very high liability, and we need to do a much better job at trying to figure out how we can manage those things. So finding our right size is very important to us as we try to work through all that. That was all the information that I have. Our annual report is also online. It has a lot of that information and is probably 40 pages long, so there's certainly a lot more detailed information if you're interested in anything else, or happy to answer questions at any point in time.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to see all of you. I'm here to talk briefly about the public safety sales tax. Obviously, it is a sales tax for public safety, but I'm talking about it because I helped with some of the numbers. So just want to give you a little background on it. Actually, it's almost probably a year to the day that we stood in this room and talked about this. The sales tax was advocated by public safety departments, particularly the fire department. They took it to a vote in November of 2024, and it was passed by the voters, and we had a quarter-cent sales tax that was effective April 1st of 2025. The language of that tax initiative was very broad. It said the money needed to be spent for public safety, personnel, equipment, and facilities. So, one of the first things we wanted to look at was, a big picture. The general fund, 42% of it is public safety. So that's $60 million, and that continues to climb. And so how could we use this tax to maybe mitigate some of the ongoing increases? So as we worked together, we're using about 20% of this towards fire trucks, police cars, things that come out of the budget that we all kind of fight for, so to speak. And then 80% was used to address the priorities that were identified, including a public safety pay structure, that was new, personnel, facility upgrades, and equipment. So this is a lot of numbers, and I don't mean for you to get into the weeds, but I wanted to just show you kind of what the priority is. As we were putting this together, we wanted to look out over 10 years to make sure that we weren't overspending. We were very candid that there's going to have to be some difficult decisions in years 12, 13, 14, and so on. How do we integrate this if this tax doesn't continue? Because the reason there was this tax is because there's not currently money in the general fund to pay for, the level of staffing that is needed. So we wanted to make sure that we addressed the priorities. Fire's priority primarily was a pay plan, and they also, as Gary mentioned, facilities. On the other side, police's issue was kind of boots on the ground and also the rising cost of technology. And one of the things that kept me up when I started was the Axon body cameras. As you know, we just had extended a long-term contract with them, but those were purchased 5 years ago with CARES funds for cash. And it was about $4 million at the time for 5 years. And the thought of having to plug that into a budget, frightened me. So the fact that this came to be, one of the first things I thought is we have to cover those body cameras. And so, with new technology and continuing cost escalations, it's about $13 million over 10 years. But that was budgeted in here. That was one of the things we made sure was included in here. So what you see here is kind of over 10 years how this got allocated out, with both fire and police got new pay structures. There also were new personnel. There were those ongoing operating expenses that we talked about for the general fund and also our capital. We are setting aside money for fire as they look at different opportunities for their training facility. And then on the police side, they also got a new pay plan. They got new personnel, ongoing operating. On the technology, that's where the $1.3 million per year approximately for the body cams, and then all of their new vehicles as well. So as you can see, we're underspending in the first few years, knowing that towards the end, we're overspending, but in the end, we're not spending more than this model shows that we're taking in over the course of that 10-year plan. This is a slide from last year when we were talking about this. So as you can see in 25 and 26, or 2025 and 26, we had, just as I mentioned, the pay plans, but we had 6 firefighters, and then a 7th in 2026, a new data analyst. And then on the police side, they also got new officers, a pay plan, and the technology. The last thing, though, that I wanted to show you is, as I said, this tax brings in about $8.5 million. Models it at about a 2% increase. $8.5 million sounds like a lot of money, but when you start looking at a $60 million public safety budget, it's not a lot of money. And so what we tried to capture in this model was the ongoing incremental costs of this new pay plan and of adding new people. So as you can see, we are adding people in 26 and 27, but unless the tax grows more than 2%, or we do some shifting within the general fund, there isn't room in this plan for adding much more. That's all I was going to say on that, unless anyone has questions. Chad.
Hi, and maybe whether it's Mr. Redlinger or Mayor Mahoney or yourself. So rate of growth project 2%. I think we had a decrease of 1% last year. What's it looking like right now? Do we know?
Well, funny you should ask. The tax department has kind of an odd month-end cutoff, so I don't ever look at it as gospel till I see it for 3 or 4 months as a trend.
It lags, yep.
We had been trending down. I think we were at about a negative 3%. However, the one I got just recently showed 8% growth, so I'm not counting on that. So I'm currently just looking at it as stable, and anything above 0 is a good thing.
So 8%'s got to be the spike for Christmas.
Pardon me?
Is the spike for Christmas, is that the 8%? Where does the 8% come from? Unless I misheard you.
Well, I think part of it is because the previous month was an early cutoff, so there were some extra monies. It's not apples to apples when you look at January through March of 25 to January of March of 26.
Yep.
So there's a little bit of that. So like I said, I don't really give much credence to it until I see a trend over several months.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and Susan is going to come right back to talk about the 2027 budget development process. Then following Susan's comments on budget, we'll also invite Brenda Derrig up to talk about the infrastructure sales tax initiated process and that ballot question that is on there for our June ballot. But I also wanted to just also bring awareness to our candidates that we are in the midst of our police chief selection process right now. You'll start to hear more about that. That is an open application process right now. And let me just first say that we're very, very grateful to the assistant chief for all of his excellent leadership in this interim period. Our department has a number of great staff. We're very fortunate that from the top all the way down to our brand new and newest officers and civilian staff, we've got a lot of great people. Your police department's in great hands, and the assistant chief has done a great job as an interim leader. So you'll hear more about the police chief selection process, and that will be here in the next several weeks. So that was the last of our public safety updates. Again, please feel free to catch our police or fire chief at the end. They're happy to answer any additional questions. And so next, we wanted to shift gears, talk a bit about budget and then infrastructure sales tax. We'll invite Susan back up. We do have an overview of just the timeline of the budget calendar, as well as just some information that was previously provided to our finance committee, which is the city commission, about debt and about some other just topical points that are just of interest today as we prepare for the 2027 budget process. So I'll turn it over to
Michael,
Susan.
could you clarify for us with the search for the police chief? Did we not cut the end off for the applicants? Is that done now?
It's closing, if not today, tomorrow. I believe it's today or tomorrow.
Do we have a number of applicants?
We have a number of applicants, and so.
Do you know, can you tell us what number that is?
I don't know that number as of this afternoon, but it was greater than 3. So we will go through a process on that.
And were those all out of state?
I don't know that information, so I'll be happy to look at that and get back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, full disclosure, I put these in the back of the slide deck just in case anybody asked about debt. So I guess we'll talk about debt for just a bit.
And we can do the timeline first if you
No,
have
it's
time.
okay.
Okay.
So obviously, much has been made about the city's level of debt. I put these slides together. I'm not sure how many are even on this, but I put this slide together to talk about it at our finance committee. The $1.3 billion gets bantered about quite a bit. But, when I was digging deeper into this, down at the bottom line 9, where there's a circle, they're not typically debt. It's more of it's from our year-end accounting, but it's our unfunded pension liabilities, our leases, and our deferred comp. So that's really not typically debt. And it really took a big bump because there was a GASB, a bookkeeping change in that year. So if you look at the line above it, 9, our debt has ranged from 923 to 1.1. So over the last 5 years, that's relatively stable. Like, this isn't a new thing. And then what I also wanted to show in the colors, and I'm going to see what's behind the slide deck, is to me, our debt is very specific. We have different buckets. Each one has a different purpose and a different repayment source. So, for example, here's the buckets again. But I did these slides. So our biggest component of debt is our refunding and improvement bonds. And that is what we do. So we're going to go out and fix the streets, right? So the city pays for 80% through federal funds, state funds, prairie dog funds, grants, and then that 20% that's assessed, the city basically acts as the banker. You can pay it off if you want as a homeowner, or you can finance it, and by doing that, you get the city's rate plus 75 basis points. So that's what this represents. And this debt is structured, our bond advisor structures it to match the payment schedule. So different types of projects, sidewalks versus streets, have a 15-year, a 20-year, a 25-year. So it's basically structured so that as people are paying their specials, we're paying down those bond payments. So there's kind of a logical, smooth flow there. The next biggest one is state revolving fund. That is a program through the state. It is a fantastic program. 30-year loans at 2%. It's basically a construction loan, so we pay interest only for the first 5 years, and then it gets amortized out. But we use this for the water treatment plant and the water plant expansion, any type of infrastructure needs. Also, we use it for, like, the utilities actually pay sometimes part of a road project as well, because when you fix a road, we do the underground and the above ground. So that comes from there as well. So it's a very inexpensive debt, a way to finance a long-term asset, and then it allows, people that use those streets or those infrastructures for the next 40 years to pay for it. So the source of repayment on that is infrastructure sales tax, which Brenda will talk about and why that's so key, because with that removed, the only thing that's paying this is utility rates, your water rate, your sewer rate, those sorts of things.
Susan, can I ask quick, sorry, just also the regionalization that's happened with utilities?
Correct. That's allowed us to expand. So for example, we sell our water to West Fargo. So the city of West Fargo did not build a water treatment plant for $1 billion because they can use ours. And by doing that, we all share the overhead costs of staff, so it keeps everyone in the region's water rates low.
I have a quick question about that. What about the data center and the water that will inevitably be needed around that? Will that have any impact?
They're based out of Harwood, and I can't remember, we keep talking about Harwood does not get their water from us. I'm seeing. Oh, we got the mayor coming to talk about that.
So the data center is Harwood, and they're doing a new process. The old process, they used to use a lot of water. They take a water tank, fill it, and then they do it once in a while. So they've changed the technology of how they cool this place. That's really what they're doing. And before, you're very right, it was very dependent on having a huge amount of water from us. We were excited because we could have used some of our used water. But the present system that they're designing, that they did in Enderlin, is they just have a tank to flush if they need it, but they don't know huge amounts of water. They also would probably be hooked up with Cass Rural. They're not hooking up with Fargo. And they're also drilling their own wells right now, so it's kind of a goofy deal. Yeah.
Okay. I'll breeze through the rest of these, but this is kind of the non-traditional, what I call, it's typically not really debt. It's some leases, the deferred comp, and the unfunded pension. So those are just budgeted into our operating. The next one is the city took out some debt on behalf of the diversion. That is paid. It's a direct bill back to the diversion. They pay us with their sales tax. They're also planning to refinance and eliminate this debt. Then we have what I call the facilities debt. So we're still paying on a little bit on Fire Station 7. Of course, we have Fire Station 8 is new. This building, the Cass Public Health Building, and then we purchased the police headquarters from Border States. So those are all paid through the general fund. So the intent of this was to foster some discussion, so the future considerations, some things we all need to look at. This is discretionary. So do we defer it? What's the source of repayment? As we're looking out ahead, the fire safety, the fire training facility that's needed, and we do have money earmarked for that within the public safety sales tax model. And then, of course, the convention center, the hotel tax is set aside for that. Then we have parking ramps. The source of repayment for that is parking operations and TIF revenue, and then the backstop for that is the general fund. And then we have also some development debt for Block 9 and other development programs. Those are, again, paid for by TIF revenue or developer payments. Backstop is the general fund. We have not had to use that. And then this is just kind of my catch-all. We have unamortized bond premiums that tie to the specific buckets, and those are all paid for by the related underlying source for that particular debt. So, and then I just mentioned these, so what's ahead? So we do a refunding improvement bond. That's really a fancy way of saying it's the infrastructure we pay ourselves back. We do that once a year. We do all the construction, and then we issue that in the fall. Source of repayment on that is special assessments. The enterprise has those SRF loans. We have existing projects and some additional projects. So that is sales tax and water rates. And then, as I mentioned, the fire training facility and the convention center. So now I think I can talk about budget. Unless anyone has any questions on that.
Quick question, Susan. I've also seen a category of overlapping debt. Can you help clarify what overlapping debt is?
Oh, gosh. Overlapping debt, actually, the way I understand it, it's a, how do I explain that? It's part of what we, it's part of our audit, and I have to explain that when we talk about, when we go to the bond council, and it has to do with taxes that are paying multiple jurisdictions as debt. So we have to quantify that. And I can look up that and get more information on you, or have one of my crack team look that up, because I don't know more than that. So I'll just talk a little bit about our budget timeline. I'm sure you've heard about it. Our budgets typically get some press. So we have started our process. Budget season for us usually starts in March, and then it goes pretty full force through September. I will highlight some of the key dates. So we started this year with our utility departments to make sure that, we could spend an adequate amount of time. I think people overlook them. I mean, they are very powerful business entities, the water department, the water reclamation department, solid waste. So we want to make sure we're spending adequate time on them. And then we had a different deadline for all the non-utility departments. And so then we have a round of kind of get to know you, make sure we understand your budget request meetings with the budget team, which includes myself, the mayor, Michael and Brenda, and HR. And then we visit with them, make sure we understand all the questions. Our plan for this year, as you may have noticed, last year we had a budget workshop. I know that those are pretty common in a lot of jurisdictions, but the city of Fargo had not done them. So we had our first one last year in July. I found July was a little too late to kind of process all that information and get it turned around. So we do have that. I don't have the exact dates, but the plan is the week of the 22nd, so that will be after we have new electeds. So it'll be new electeds, and if the outgoing electeds want to join us. But it'll be an opportunity for you to hear from all the departments. We're still working on kind of the standardized format, but we want to make sure that they're able to talk through their budgets and their concerns with you. And then the following dates, those are all kind of TBD. We're in a bit of a new territory. We haven't had a new mayor in 16 years. So, typically the mayor presents the mayor's budget. Well, this one will have come in halfway through. So we'll want to talk with that new person and see how they want to put their stamp on it and how they want to present it. There are some very specific dates that are required through Century Code. So we have to have the preliminary deadline, the preliminary budget done by August 10th. Basically, that's where we set the cap. We can always reduce our mills, but we can't increase it beyond there. And then we have to have a hearing. The hearing is scheduled for September 28th. And then we have the final budget needs to be to the county by October 12th. So that is the overview of the budget.
Well, thank you, Susan. And next we'll have Brenda come up, and she'll talk about the infrastructure sales tax. And then following that, Ian McLean, our city attorney, will just provide a real high-level overview of the open meeting law as well as open records. And then, again, that will be a much more in-depth conversation at an orientation session in the future with the individuals who win at the elected office.
So good evening. I'm Brenda Derrick. I'm the Assistant City Administrator. And just want to give you a little information on our infrastructure sales tax. So at our June election, we are asking the voters to consider extending the 1% dedicated infrastructure sales tax. So you can see here, right now, our local City of Fargo sales tax is 2.25%. What makes that up is we have our 1% diversion and then a 1/4 public safety, along with our 1% infrastructure sales tax. And so that sales tax is set to expire in 2028. When we compare our local rate with other cities and how we compare to other cities within the state of North Dakota, West Fargo has a local tax of 2.5%, Grand Forks 2.25%, Bismarck 2%, and Minot 2%. So in 2024, the 1% infrastructure sales tax generated approximately $34 million for our core infrastructure. So these monies are strictly dedicated to streets, water supply, treatment and distribution, and wastewater collection, treatment, along with flood protection. And so when you look at the current funding sources of our core infrastructure, you can see where those monies come from. So for our streets, the infrastructure sales tax is our only local funding mechanism. And so we have our infrastructure sales tax, and that pairs with our special assessments. For water treatment and mains, we have our sales tax and our water rates. For the wastewater, we have our sales tax and our wastewater rates. And then for flood protection, we have the flood sales tax. They take a little bit, about a quarter of our infrastructure sales tax, and then Cass County has a sales tax. And that is all going to that, to our flood protection. If you want to go to the second page, when you look at who contributes to the sales tax, you know, we all know the city of Fargo is a regional economic hub, and we're able to provide services that extends beyond our residents. So the map over to the right actually is right out of our growth plan. We have non-residents regularly using our streets and our utility systems and contributing to our ongoing maintenance costs. So a significant portion of that sales tax revenue is generated by non-residents that helps share the cost in maintaining our infrastructure between the residents and businesses along with our visitors. So to date, when our 20 years is up, we will have collected approximately $600 million in that infrastructure sales tax, which has directly been used to help fund our core infrastructure projects. Certain items like groceries, diapers, prescription drugs aren't subject to the sales tax. And then the funds from the infrastructure sales tax can only be used for construction and maintenance of our core infrastructure. I'd answer any questions if you have them. We'll hand it off to Ian now.
Welcome. My name is Ian McLean. I'm the city attorney for Fargo. Here to talk about everybody's favorite topic, which is open meetings and open records. I know a few of you have served on the Cass County Commission, Fargo Park Board, school board, so a lot of you are familiar with open records. I'm going to be on a very high level overview today. We'll go over it in much more in depth when you're elected. The presumption should just be all records are open in the state of North Dakota. You'll have a city email address. You probably have your own personal email address, Gmail, Yahoo. It doesn't matter whether it's on a city email address or your personal email address. It doesn't matter if it's on a city phone or your personal phone. Instagram, Facebook, direct messages, WhatsApp, all of those things are public record, no matter what format they're in. If it talks about public business, it is an open record in North Dakota. On open meetings, so the city commission is obviously 5 members, so a quorum is 3 members or more. So anytime we have 3 members that discuss public business, that is a public meeting. It does not matter if you're in the elevator outside of here. It doesn't matter if you're on the golf course. It doesn't matter if you're at a restaurant. If 3 of you are discussing public business, it is a public meeting that needs to be noticed. That includes text message threads. So if 3 of you are friends and you're in a text message thread, you can't talk about public business. Same thing with email, which we'll get into. We always ask our commissioners, do not reply all, because by replying all, we often will have, well, that is a meeting that's discussing business. The other thing is serial meetings. This becomes more of an issue. So the mayor is not allowed to go to Commissioner Kolpak and then go to Commissioner Turnberg and Commissioner Strand and say, how are you going to vote on this? And just say, well, each one was just a one-on-one meeting. That is a serial meeting, and that is a violation of the open meeting law. So we try to avoid that as well. So I sort of talked about do not reply all on any of your city emails. Try to avoid text or chats with other commissioners, especially 2 or more. Assume anything you write is going to become public. I think that's just a good recommendation. If you're unsure, we're always happy to talk. So please feel free to give me a call at any time if you ever have any questions on open meetings or open records. We'll go over much more in depth in this when you are elected. But thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you, Ian. And we'll just close on a couple of last items. And first, I want to talk about the legislative session and what we do at the City of Fargo with legislative affairs. I want to just lift up a person that we work with pretty regularly, and I actually just coincidentally had the opportunity to talk to her about an hour and a half ago, Terry Efforts in Bismarck. Terry is an attorney lobbyist who we work with. She's with the Efforts Law Firm. And she's done a great job on behalf of the city of Fargo in advocating for city priorities. They're really established by the city commission. So what we do in the city of Fargo is every couple of years, when the regular legislative session rolls around, is we have a conversation with the city commission about what are the priorities that we want to stand up for, and importantly, what are those things we want to stand against out at the legislature, knowing that there are a variety of bills that are going to come up every single legislative session. Former Commissioner Peterson knows this well. The Cass County will do the same. Fargo Public Schools will do the same. West Fargo Schools the same. Just really talking about how we can try better our positions as we move forward. And so I'll just give you an example of where we try to interact with legislators too. In 2024, we actually had probably about 4 different meetings with the legislators leading up to and following the 2025 legislative session. And so in our case with the City Commission, we talked early about our priorities, again, what we wanted to stand for. In September, we had a meeting. In November, we had 2 meetings. And then following that legislative session, we're always trying to recap how we did. And so in June of 2025, we had a really, really good opportunity to connect with the Fargo, West Fargo, and Greater Cass County legislators. We live stream that. We invite them into our space here, and we just talk about how do we partner with you, right? How do we help you advance the interest of Fargo and our member entities that we work with, including the Park District, including Fargo Schools, West Fargo Schools, et cetera, and really have an open and productive dialogue. That's a really important feature for us. We're going to continue that in 2027 as we think about our priorities for 26. I can imagine the meeting already that we will likely have right after the election, likely in November or December, when we want to sit down, talk to the legislators about what's really important for us. Just a couple of highlights from 2025. We spent a lot of time on social issues in 2025 as well as public safety issues. Just a couple of examples, unhoused and trying to deal with chronic mental health issues that our public and our law enforcement community needs to deal with, as well as traffic safety, fleeing, fines and the amount of fines for fleeing in the event of traffic. We talked about transit. That was a really key topic for us, trying to get a more permanent, regular source of funding for the MAT bus system here in Fargo, Moorhead, West Fargo. And then, of course, a topic that we're always talking about. We've had 2 mega projects in the last 20 years. One was the diversion project that is well underway and will near its completion in the next 18 months. But the other mega project, of course, has been the Red River Valley Water Supply Project. We are partners with the Red River Valley Water Supply Project as well as the users of that project called the Lake Agassiz Water Authority. And so we work with them routinely at the legislature and outside of the legislature about how we advance that project. Fargo, in the case of the water project, is 62% of the cost of that project. We are a huge component of that project, as well as the city of Grand Forks. And by extension of working with West Fargo is also a huge contributor as well as beneficiary of that project. So in 2027, I imagine we'll continue to talk about the water supply project. And I imagine, too, when we sit down and we talk to the future city commission, we're also going to be talking about the impact of the property tax cap that's been in place now. We know that based on our conversations, again, with Terry in Bismarck, as well as the North Dakota League of Cities, there's going to be a real interest, I think, on the part of some of our cities that we partner with to want to try to talk about that, how it's working in North Dakota, how we are complying to that law. We are doing that, but there are definitely some limitations. There are definitely some challenges when you talk about growth and you talk about how we keep up with the service demands that our public expects here in the city of Fargo. So I do expect that we're going to have a number of conversations about that in the near future, as well as transit, as well as infrastructure, and how we take care of additional needs for a growing Fargo, Moorhead, and West Fargo. So that's just a high-level summary of what we do at the legislature, and just really appreciate the City Commission's prior interest, and I know future interest, in just trying to help us out at the legislature. We typically will activate the commission. The mayor certainly has given a lot of time, a lot of windshield time driving out to Bismarck and advocating directly with testimony, both in person as well as written testimony. And I know that that will be very much the case again, too, as we look to the future. We'll make sure that that commission is included and is a part of that process. So that's all I wanted to share on that. Happy to answer any questions folks would have on legislative, but Definitely want to reserve some time for you here at the end, that we're right on time. We wanted to save about 15 minutes to have kind of an open Q&A. Your microphone, and thank you for using your microphone when you're doing your introductions. We're happy to take any questions you have for us or for our staff back here. More than happy to help you out with any final questions here. And then, go ahead.
I just want to close out a couple things. In 2006, when Furnace looked at the 1 cent sales tax, we never looked at a flood protection project. That was not on the books at that time. Our water and wastewater plants were old, derelict. We really didn't have a lot at that time. And the previous mayors did not put a lot of money into the streets, so you had really a lot of potholes throughout the city. It was brilliant to do the 1 cent infrastructure sales tax, as 50% of it is paid by other people. And that is critical. If I look at all the financial pictures that cities have, that's a critical key to our success. Now, when we originally started on the flood project, when Furnace was around, it was an $800 million project. When we first started it out, it was going to be the South Side project. That went to 1.8, it went to 2.2, and it's now a $3.2 billion project. We are able to finance that. We've got great help from all our partners, and that was a masterful thing. But the thing you have to remember as citizens of Fargo, when we do rehab specials, the city of Fargo pays almost 75 to 80% of that. In other cities, it's 50%. In other cities, it's 25%. So anybody who's in a neighborhood, I had a mill and overlay in my neighborhood, cost me $2,000 over 20 years. You can't do any better. If I didn't have this infrastructure sales tax, it's $4,000. If we do any major reconstruction, if we put pipes and things in the ground, then oftentimes the specials used to be $20,000 to $30,000. And you can see what's going on in Horace. People are screaming, do not do that to me. Again, because we help out in so many different ways, oftentimes ours is $15,000. Tom and the team will all look very carefully at how high is this going to impact. And we think about a normal house, 200,000, 300,000. We're not thinking about the mega houses, but we're trying to think about what does that do to our average citizen? How can we knock it down as far as possible? So that infrastructure tax, all that goes up. If that goes away, all that goes up. Your utilities go up. So we're in the lower fourth of utilities throughout the state. I got in a discussion with a guy from Carrington one time, and I said, here's what Red River Project's going to do to you. And he said, well, Tim, in Fargo, you pay $30 a month for water. I said, well, what do you pay in Carrington? He said, $55. He said, if I go up, my residents will scream at me. And I said, well, if I go up, people will scream at me too, but imagine you going from 30 to 35 versus 55 to 60. That has a huge impact. So I just want you to remember that infrastructure tax is very helpful to us, and if you don't have it, if you have another solution, find it and tell me about it. But $34 million is hard to come in a budget, and this is outside our budget. We have a $140 million budget. That $32 million all goes to infrastructure. I can't touch it. I can't do anything with it. The other thing is that safety tax, Mike and I talked about, $8 million a year. You don't think that's so much, but that's a lot of help to our public safety, and that was a great thing that got passed. So just in some ways, the city is very innovative. Our team is very lean. They try to think of every way to save money. And when Susan was doing the debt structure, we have average debt for a city our size. We're not bankrupt. All of it is manageable debt. You're going to have that if you grow. If you want to stop growth, you're not going to have that. So our specials for new growth is about $550 to $600 million a year. That is actually going down now because how many housing starts we had last year? 200. We normally had 400 to 500. So unless we as a city continue to grow, you're not going to have housing for our housing stock. So you got to think about that when you're thinking of solutions. So I appreciate you coming today. There's a lot of information you're given, but if you want any other depth, Michael and the team, anybody, the team members is happy to meet with you. Chief is all the chiefs are happy to meet with you. We have the finest police department, the finest fire department. I think we outshine people all over the country, and we've seen that over and over and over. And Public Works, if you want to, the best weatherman is Ben Dow. So if I really want to know what the weather is, I call Ben, because he really knows when it's going to snow. So we were going to get 12 inches one day, and Ben said 4. So I went out and did something else. But thank you.
Well, thank you, Mayor. And let me, too, just add my thanks to our staff for joining us and really preparing some great materials for you. And please know that for those who move on after the election and will be joining us at the City Commission, we'll make sure, again, that you're prepared for that day one success, and we'll really get in depth on a good orientation session. So I just really want to thank them for all of their help. And any final questions, we're happy to answer them. If not, our contact information is, again, located on the back of that agenda. Please reach out. Please email. If there's anything that we can do to answer a question, happy to do that. And again, just emphasizing that we really would share the same information with all the candidates. Our job is to support that future board. Whenever that board joins us here in July, we support them all equally with the same information at the same time. So we're happy to do that. And if there are any final questions here, we'll give you about 10 minutes back. So we just appreciate you all coming in. All right, well, thank you so much. We appreciate it.